Dear Anthony, so this installment, I'm going to talk about management. Last time we talked about producers. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about management. It's also super important to be very judicious and careful who you choose to be your manager, if you even need one at all. Why is that? Well, what does a manager do? A manager manages you, duh, but they need to manage you or your group, if it's a group, and they need to manage your career. They need to manage the record label. They need to organize and manage your publishing. They need to organize and manage your tour schedule or your gig opportunities. And sometimes they manage the finances, although that should be you or a separate, if you're successful enough, a separate money manager. Now, how do you find somebody like this? Well, there are a lot of really good people who have been doing it for many, many years. And there are a lot of really, really bad people who have been doing it for many years. And there's bad people who just call themselves managers. So why would you need one? Maybe you don't. Maybe you do. A lot of reasons I could think if you need a manager is if you have a lot of things going on, you can't handle it all yourself. You get someone experienced and reliable to do those things, yeah? And for this, they get a fee. Now, when I was coming up, that fee was 15%. I've heard it be as much as 20. I think that's rather usurious, 20%, because, yeah. But I've also heard it be as low as 10. And I think a lot of the really, really big acts, it's 10, but of course they're making millions, right? So it evens out. But they're also doing a lot more work, I would imagine. So do you need a manager? Unless you're in demand, and unless you have thousands of fans, or at least 1,000, like they always call it, the 1,000 long tail, you need at least 1,000 loyal, forever fans to follow you to be able to even make a living. That's usually the baseline, right? Then if you don't have that, no, right? I mean, if you have 70,000 listeners on Spotify and that's it, okay, you're making $29 a month off of that or something. So no, you don't. If you have a record deal with a real record label, and what I mean real is someone with distribution who's working hard for you to promote you or your band and your records on a consistent basis. If you're touring, when we're allowed to tour again, and you're playing, more than a few shows per week, or even 4 or 5 shows, more than 4 or 5 shows a month, let's say if you're regional. If you have songs that have the potential to get into TV and film or be used in commercials, if those songs may have the potential to be covered by other people, then maybe, yes, you want to consider a manager. Also, if there's more than one person in this scenario, if it's a group, it's sometimes helpful to have somebody to, be a filter for the other members, because you can vote. But, if you have a manager, the manager can kind of present the entire disconnected, objective view of things to the group and help settle any disagreements or misunderstandings. That's when you need a manager. You do not need a manager if you're selling a few hundred records and you're just getting Spotify plays. It's just don't. So, and there's a reason for this. So I was watching the Black Sabbath documentary the other day, and here is another band that just when they were getting big, which was a surprise to everybody at the time, including the band, they had a manager who was actually doing things for them. Because what does a manager do? A manager manages opportunities for you. In the best case scenario, they create opportunities for you. So that's where you might need a manager, even if you're not big, but you have potential to where they can create opportunities. But back to Black Sabbath, this particular gentleman created opportunities and was doing quite well by them. And just when they're really cooking, they got a #1 album, shocked everybody. They found out that the homes that they had bought, they didn't even own them. The manager and the management firm owned them. Everybody in the band. So they fired the manager, and the manager kicked them out of all their houses and gave them like 3 hours to get out. So you have to be on top of your shit. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's your responsibility too. I'm not blaming Black Sabbath. It's hard when you're young and you're coming up, but as I said in one of my recent episodes about money, it's on you, man. You're the one who's responsible for where this all goes. Because we're playing the long game here. If you're going to be a professional musician, you're not dealing with your 20s and your 30s, right? You're dealing with your 40s and your 50s, because that's when it's going to slow down, and that's when all this is really going to matter, okay? Even if you're big. I mean, the current market is affecting everybody, all right? You know, people didn't start complaining about Spotify and streaming and file sharing. I mean, the big acts didn't complain until they saw their publishing checks go down, you know, because they were still making money from playing live. You have to think ahead. So, again, Black Sabbath, they fired the dude. Now they don't have a manager. Now they don't have homes. So you got to be on top of this. And that's why it's really important to pick out somebody who's reliable and honest and experienced, and stay on top of them. It's your responsibility what they're doing with your money and your career. They're just handling it, right? So if stuff goes wrong, it's just as much your responsibility, and you need to know constantly. You should be in contact with them, and there should be paperwork. Another thing, speaking of paperwork, most managers, you know, Black Sabbath fires their manager, depending on that contract, but standard is that guy gets their money, his cut for 5 more years, even after they're fired. That's why this is important, okay? So, you really have to consider whether you need one, and you really have to be on top of what they do and who it is doing for you. Now, sometimes you can have a friend handle this for you early in your career. That's cool. It's good to share, cut them in, groovy. If you trust them, still get it on paper, and make sure your out is that they don't collect money from the next 20 years or forever of your career if things don't work out. It's got to be on paper. Everybody has to agree. It's got to be a legal document. Okay, it's very, very important. And I'll give you a story. So there's someone I care about a lot, a very dear friend of mine in the industry. He's been a top manager and producer for over 40 years. He just retired. And he had a group during the 90s that he put together, He produced the records, he managed them, he got them a record deal on a major, major label, a label that he had a relationship with for over 30 years, and they had 8 #1 records. And then the group decided that they didn't want him to be their manager anymore, and he was like, fine, that's fine. Of course, according to the agreement, I get my cut for the next 5 years, and they went their separate ways. But the next time my friend talked to the head of the label, and this head of the label is a very, very famous person you hear about all the time in the industry. His name is mentioned. He's like, hey, so how's it going? He's like, oh, well, me and we're sorry, we're not going to be seeing you. I'm not going to be seeing you anymore because they've decided to go in another direction. Oh. Well, head of the label signed this group because of him, right? So what do you think happened? Group got dumped by the label. They made one more record, didn't do anything, and end of group. Now you could say my friend's a dick for even saying that to the head of the label, but he owed him that because he knew him for 30 years. Secondly, the label asked. And third is the reason the group dumped my buddy as the manager wasn't because he was a bad dude or, was doing anything untoward or underhanded or stealing their money. It was because somebody got a new boyfriend or girlfriend who told them, oh, no, you should go with so-and-so. Don't go with this guy, And that's the other part of this you have to consider, is people will tell you stuff all the time about, oh, you should do that. Yeah, okay. Trouble. I'll give you another example. So there was an artist I was working with. For 2.5 years, I put money into this artist, hired the best musicians in the world, especially for their specific style of music, the best ever for that music that they wanted to do. Went in and cut tracks for 2.5 years, endless vocal sessions, making sure we had precisely what we wanted to do. Bob Olson and I worked together to coach this person, try to make them what we felt was the best representation of them. And this person went and got a new boyfriend. And right when I got them a major label record deal, the record label said, we love this, we want it, this is great. Everybody's happy, fantastic. We need 2 more singles. We need some up-tempo stuff. So if you could give us 2 more up-tempo singles, fine, no problem. Went and wrote 2 more up-tempo numbers, went and cut them, and then a week later, I get a call from a lawyer who apparently is the lawyer that this artist has just hired. They want out of the deal, out of the contract with me, which was an extremely fair contract. I gave them 50% of everything because I'm an artist. I'm not going to be a dick. I just want to get the record out because we worked so hard on it. I'll make my money, but they're going to make more. And the lawyer says they want out. I said, okay, fine. I own everything that's been done up to this point, and they can go. And it turned out that the artist's boyfriend talked this person into it, and another producer had come along and, told them all kinds of crazy, fantastical things that they were going to do for him. 10 years later, that person is still not signed to a record deal, which is a shame because they were super duper talented. So this is why it's important, and it's important to get it in writing. It's important to protect yourself, but don't jump into things. Don't, be careful of who you associate with and why and when that's necessary. And then if everybody's on the same plane and is doing it for the right reasons and understands all the parameters and details, agrees, and is altruistic of course, we all want to make money, but don't do anything just because you want to say you have a manager. It's just not a good way to start your career, and you can get in litigation after litigation after litigation forever and go nowhere. So, but most important, again, it's your responsibility. What they do in your name is your responsibility. The money is your responsibility. What they do is your responsibility, and you're going to be held account to it. So you have to hold them account to it and stay on top of it constantly. Okay? Probably missing a bunch of stuff, but that's the high and low of it. If you have any questions, post them below. I know a ton of people in the business who are great managers. I just think that there's a time. All right? See ya.